In 2026, 1.2 million Americans wake up, go to work, and then sleep in their cars. Not because they're unemployed, not because they gave up, but because having a job no longer guarantees a place to live. This is the working homeless crisis, and it's exploding faster than anyone wants to admit. In 2026, an estimated 1.2 million Americans with jobs are living in their cars. These are people earning paychecks but unable to secure housing. Unlike traditional homelessness statistics, this group remains largely untracked because they avoid shelters and encampments while maintaining employment. School teachers, Amazon warehouse workers, hospital staff, delivery drivers, retail employees, and contractors now represent a growing share of this hidden population. Federal housing data reveals that over 60% of renters are cost-burdened, spending more than 30% of income on housing. For millions, that figure exceeds 50%, leaving zero margin for emergencies. A single unexpected expense like a medical bill, car repair, or insurance increase can instantly break housing stability. Once rent is missed, eviction typically follows within 30 to 60 days, regardless of employment status. The rise of car homelessness signals structural failure where income no longer guarantees shelter. This is not driven by substance abuse or unemployment, but by simple math. Wages have risen roughly 18 to 22% over the past decade, while rents have increased 40 to 60% in many metro areas. The gap has become unsurvivable. Car living has become the last buffer before total homelessness. When that buffer breaks, people fall directly into street homelessness faster than ever before. This represents systemic collapse, not individual failure. A full-time job used to guarantee basic housing. In 2026, that assumption no longer holds. The median hourly wage for many essential workers ranges between $18 and $24 per hour, translating to roughly $2,800 to $3,700 per month before taxes. Meanwhile, the average one-bedroom apartment in many U.S. cities now costs $1,800 to $2,600, not including utilities, parking, insurance, or mandatory fees. Landlords increasingly require renters to earn 3 times the rent, meaning a $2,000 apartment requires $6,000 monthly income or $72,000 annually. This far exceeds what most service sector and blue-collar workers earn. Even studio apartments are failing affordability thresholds. As a result, people with steady employment are simply rejected, not evicted. This forces workers into impossible choices: sleep in cars, commute longer distances, or quit jobs entirely. In high-cost regions, workers often live inside the same parking lots where they work, arriving early and leaving late to avoid attention. The system now demands labor while refusing shelter. This breakdown impacts local economies. Employers face higher turnover, increased absenteeism, and burnout, while workers operate under chronic sleep deprivation. Productivity drops, healthcare costs rise, and labor shortages worsen. Not because people won't work, but because working no longer sustains life. The fundamental contract between employment and survival has been severed. Most working homeless Americans deliberately stay invisible. They rotate parking locations, sleep in hospital garages, industrial zones, big box store lots, and residential streets away from schools. Visibility increases risk of police contact, fines, or towing, any of which can end employment instantly. Unlike shelter populations, car dwellers often maintain clean clothing, hygiene routines, and professional appearances. Many use gym memberships, workplace bathrooms, or public facilities to shower and prepare for work. This creates the illusion that the crisis is smaller than it actually is. In reality, it remains hidden by necessity. Municipal homelessness counts rely heavily on shelter usage and visible encampments, meaning hundreds of thousands are excluded from official data. Cities therefore underestimate the crisis and underfund solutions. When policies are written, these people are invisible until they are criminalized. This invisibility also prevents advocacy. Workers fear losing jobs if employers discover their housing status. Parents hide vehicle living from schools to avoid child welfare involvement. Seniors avoid reporting their situation out of shame. The result is a massive silent population living one police interaction away from disaster. The working homeless are not absent from society. They are embedded within it, fueling the economy while being systematically erased from its protections. They work beside you, serve you, and remain unseen by design, not choice. In 2026, a used car is often cheaper than securing an apartment. First month's rent, last month's rent, security deposit, application fees, and move-in costs routinely exceed $6,000 to $8,000. For someone already struggling, this barrier is impossible to overcome. By contrast, maintaining a vehicle may cost $300 to $600 per month, even with insurance and fuel. For many, this becomes the only viable shelter option. Vehicles offer privacy, mobility, and proximity to employment, things shelters often cannot provide. This shift represents a fundamental redefinition of housing. Cars are not being used recreationally. They are being used defensively to avoid full collapse. Once a person loses their vehicle, they lose access to work, income, and safety simultaneously. Auto lenders, insurers, and municipalities now indirectly control housing outcomes. Parking laws, registration requirements, and vehicle codes function as housing enforcement tools, even though vehicles were never intended to serve this role. This is not van life. This is not adventure. This is a forced adaptation to an economy that prices workers out of shelter while still demanding their labor. The distinction matters because romanticizing survival erases the crisis causing it. When cars become housing, the housing system has already failed completely. Even for those currently employed, income instability is accelerating the crisis. In 2025 to 2026 alone, over 1 million layoffs occurred across tech, logistics, retail, and healthcare support sectors. Many employed workers face reduced hours, unpredictable schedules, or gigas-based pay with no guarantees. When income fluctuates, rent does not. Missed hours quickly become missed payments. Emergency savings for most Americans remain under $1,000, far below what is needed to survive even 1 month without full income. Short-term unemployment benefits rarely cover rent, and application delays leave workers exposed. Once housing is lost, recovery becomes exponentially harder. Employers may require a stable address. Background checks reveal eviction records. Transportation costs rise. Job searches become restricted by location and mobility. This is why car homelessness is exploding even among those who did everything right. The system offers no buffer, no grace period, and no recovery lane. One disruption is enough to trigger a permanent downward shift. The traditional safety net assumes temporary hardship with quick recovery. In reality, housing loss now happens faster than assistance arrives. By the time benefits are approved, eviction is complete. Workers who maintained perfect attendance for years find themselves sleeping in parking lots within weeks. The speed of collapse has accelerated beyond institutional response capacity. Once a worker is evicted, housing access collapses long after income recovers. In most states, evictions remain on tenant screening reports for 7 years, functioning like a financial felony. Even renters who regain stable employment are automatically rejected by large property management firms that rely on algorithm-based screening systems. Landlords increasingly outsource decisions to third-party screening companies. These systems do not evaluate context. Job loss, medical emergencies, or temporary hardship are irrelevant. An eviction becomes a binary disqualifier. As a result, people with sufficient income are locked out of housing indefinitely. Private landlords, once a fallback, are disappearing. Corporate ownership now controls a growing share of rental units and enforces uniform screening rules nationwide. This leaves evicted workers with no legal path back into traditional housing, even years later. Car living becomes a long-term condition, not a temporary setback. Workers are forced to remain mobile, avoid detection, and rebuild life outside the housing system entirely. This is why the working homeless population keeps growing even when employment numbers appear strong. Eviction is no longer a reset. It is an exit ramp from housing itself. The system offers no re-entry plan, no second chance, and no forgiveness. Once marked, workers remain excluded regardless of income, employment, or time passed. As vehicle homelessness rises, cities are not expanding housing access. They are expanding enforcement. Municipalities across the U.S. have increased overnight parking bans, anti-sleeping ordinances, and vehicle habitation laws, often under pressure from residents and commercial districts. These laws do not reduce homelessness. They redistribute it, forcing people to move constantly. Workers must now plan sleep around enforcement schedules rather than health or safety. Some cities conduct coordinated sweeps that issue tickets, warnings, or immediate tows. Each interaction carries risk. A citation can cost $100 to $500. Failure to pay leads to license suspension or vehicle impoundment. This transforms homelessness into a legal liability, not a housing issue. Crucially, enforcement occurs without alternatives. Safe parking programs are limited, oversubscribed, or restricted by income, employment, or residency requirements. Many cities offer 0 legal places to sleep in a vehicle. This approach converts survival into a crime while maintaining the illusion of order. Instead of solving the housing shortage, cities are managing visibility, pushing working people deeper into instability. The enforcement-first model assumes that discomfort will motivate people into housing they cannot access. It punishes poverty while protecting property values. The result is not fewer homeless workers, but more traumatized, criminalized, and financially destroyed ones. Vehicle towing is the most destructive trigger in the working homeless pipeline. A single tow can cost $300 to $1,000 upfront, with daily storage fees accumulating rapidly. For someone living paycheck to paycheck, recovery is often impossible. Lose the vehicle, and you lose housing, transportation, and income at the same time. Most jobs are inaccessible without reliable transportation, especially in suburban or industrial areas. Missing work due to a tow often results in termination within days. Once a job is lost, reclaiming the vehicle becomes even harder. Impound fees grow daily. After a short window, vehicles may be auctioned off, permanently erasing the last asset the person had. This is why towing functions as a point of no return event. It accelerates people from working homelessness into full street homelessness almost instantly. Cities rely heavily on towing revenue, while private tow operators profit from enforcement-heavy environments. The result is a system where economic collapse is monetized, not prevented. The towing industry operates with minimal oversight. Fees are set arbitrarily. Storage lots are often distant from public transit, and retrieval windows are deliberately narrow. Workers returning from shifts discover their vehicle gone with no warning and no recourse. By the time they navigate bureaucracy, fees have doubled. The system is designed for profit extraction, not problem solving. What should be a recoverable setback becomes total life collapse engineered for revenue generation. One of the fastest growing segments of the working homeless population is families with children. Parents with jobs are increasingly sleeping in cars while attempting to maintain school attendance and normal routines for their kids. Children do homework in back seats, eat meals from coolers, and rotate parking locations nightly. Parents wake early to avoid police attention and arrive late to avoid notice. This constant movement disrupts sleep, education, and mental health. Many families avoid shelters because they separate parents by gender, impose curfews incompatible with work schedules, or ban vehicles entirely. For these families, a car, however inadequate, offers unity and control. Schools often remain unaware. Parents fear disclosure will trigger involvement from child welfare agencies, even though the root issue is housing affordability, not neglect. This creates a hidden generational impact. Children experience chronic instability while systems fail to acknowledge their existence. The long-term cost, educational disruption, trauma, and reduced mobility extends far beyond housing. These children wake before dawn in parking lots, brush teeth in gas station bathrooms, and attend school as if everything is normal. Teachers rarely know, classmates never suspect. The invisibility protects parents from intervention but leaves children without support. Developmental impacts appear later as anxiety, academic struggles, and difficulty forming stable relationships. The crisis is not just displacing families, it is programming the next generation for survival mode from childhood. Healthcare aides, warehouse staff, delivery drivers, sanitation workers, and public sector employees now make up a significant share of the vehicle house population. These are workers society relies on daily, yet cannot house. Many earn too much to qualify for assistance, yet too little to meet rent requirements. This income gap leaves them unsupported by both the market and social programs. Some commute hours from sleeping locations to workplaces they help operate. Others live near hospitals, warehouses, and distribution centers because that is where enforcement is lighter and restrooms are accessible. This reality exposes a contradiction. The economy demands essential labor but refuses to sustain essential lives. Workers are not failing the system. The system is failing its workers. The nurse who changes your bandages sleeps in her sedan. The delivery driver who brings your packages rotates between 3 parking lots to avoid tickets. The sanitation worker who collects your trash showers at a truck stop before his shift. These are not edge cases. They are the workforce keeping infrastructure functional. When essential workers cannot afford housing in the communities they serve, those communities collapse slowly from within. Teacher shortages worsen, healthcare wait times increase, services degrade. The crisis does not stay contained. It spreads through every system until functionality itself becomes unsustainable. Emergency shelters were never designed for working Americans living in vehicles. Most shelters operate on fixed entry and exit hours, forcing residents to leave early in the morning and return at night, often incompatible with shift work, overnight jobs, or long commutes. Missing curfews can result in immediate expulsion. Many shelters also separate families by gender, meaning parents and children cannot stay together. Others prohibit vehicles, forcing people to abandon the only asset keeping them employed. For someone working full-time, entering a shelter often means losing their job within days. Capacity is another issue. In many major cities, shelters are already operating at 90 to 100% capacity with wait lists stretching weeks or months. Seasonal overflow programs are temporary and inconsistent. Safety concerns are significant. Reports of theft, assault, and lack of privacy deter many workers who must remain rested and alert to maintain employment. As a result, many choose car living as the lesser risk. Shelters are a crisis response, not a housing pathway. They do not address rent barriers, eviction records, or income-to-rent mismatches. For working homeless Americans, shelters often accelerate collapse rather than prevent it. The mismatch between shelter design and working life creates impossible choices where survival requires rejecting help. Living in a vehicle imposes extreme stress on the body and mind. Chronic sleep deprivation is common as people sleep lightly to remain alert for police, noise, or safety threats. Studies link poor sleep to reduced cognitive function, increased workplace accidents, and long-term health damage. Hygiene access is inconsistent. Healthcare workers living in cars report difficulty maintaining sanitation standards, while food insecurity leads to reliance on ultra-processed, shelf-stable meals. This contributes to rising rates of hypertension, diabetes, and immune suppression. Mental health impacts are severe. Constant uncertainty, fear of enforcement, and social isolation drive anxiety and depression. Many avoid social interactions entirely to hide their situation, cutting off support networks. Healthcare access worsens without stable addresses, appointment reminders, prescriptions, and insurance continuity breakdown. Preventative care is delayed until conditions become emergencies, increasing long-term costs to the system. This is not a lifestyle. It is prolonged survival under pressure. Over time, even highly resilient individuals experience burnout, illness, and reduced work performance, making recovery increasingly difficult. The toll is cumulative. Each night of broken sleep adds to exhaustion. Each missed meal weakens the body. Each day of isolation deepens depression. Workers who once thrived now operate at diminished capacity, making mistakes they never made before, struggling with tasks that were once automatic. Vehicle homelessness is not the end stage of poverty. It is the early warning signal of middle-class collapse. Historically, housing instability followed job loss. In 2026, housing loss increasingly precedes unemployment. When workers with incomes between $40,000 and $70,000 cannot secure housing, the traditional definition of middle class becomes meaningless. The economic ladder has lost its lower rungs. This phase occurs before tents appear. Cars allow mobility, concealment, and continued employment. Once vehicles are lost, visible homelessness rises sharply. What cities label a sudden surge is actually the final stage of a process that began years earlier. Middle-class erosion has ripple effects: reduced consumer spending, lower tax revenues, declining school stability, and increased healthcare costs. Communities feel the impact long before policymakers acknowledge it. Ignoring car homelessness is equivalent to ignoring smoke while the structure burns. By the time encampments dominate headlines, the collapse is already irreversible. The middle class was defined by stability, predictability, and upward mobility. Car homelessness represents the loss of all three. Workers who followed every prescribed path, earned degrees, maintained employment, and saved responsibly now sleep in parking lots. The American dream has not stalled. It has inverted. Hard work now leads downward, not up. Several forces converge in 2026 to intensify the working homeless crisis. Rents continue rising due to housing shortages while insurance premiums, utilities, and food costs increase simultaneously. Wage growth remains modest and uneven. Interest rates keep home ownership out of reach while investor-owned rentals limit affordability. Corporate landlords prioritize yield over occupancy, reducing flexibility for struggling tenants. At the same time, layoffs and automation reduce job security. Even employed workers face unpredictable income. Safety nets fail to adjust to real-world costs, leaving millions ineligible for aid. The result is acceleration. More people fall into vehicle living and fewer escape. Recovery timelines stretch from months to years. The pipeline grows longer, not wider. This is why 2026 marks a turning point, not because the crisis begins, but because it locks in. Every system that could slow the crisis is instead accelerating it. Housing construction lags demand. Rent control efforts face legal challenges. Eviction protections expire. Wage stagnation persists. Meanwhile, costs compound faster than incomes rise. The gap widens daily. What was once a problem requiring intervention has become a structural condition requiring transformation. Without fundamental change to housing policy, wage standards, and economic design, 2026 does not represent a peak. It represents the new baseline from which things only worsen. While workers lose shelter, several sectors profit. Municipalities collect fines and towing revenue. Private tow companies earn millions annually from impound fees. Parking enforcement budgets expand as housing access shrinks. Large landlords benefit from reduced pressure to lower rents. High rejection rates normalize exclusion, allowing units to remain priced beyond local incomes. Credit and screening firms profit from eviction data sales. Healthcare systems absorb emergency costs later while preventative care collapses. The financial burden shifts without accountability. This is not accidental. Systems adapt to monetize instability rather than resolve it. When collapse becomes profitable, solutions stall. The economic incentives are clear. Cities balance budgets using enforcement revenue. Landlords maximize profits through exclusion. Screening companies sell data. Towing operators extract fees. Insurance companies raise premiums. Each actor benefits from crisis persistence. No single entity causes the problem, but all profit from its continuation. Reform threatens revenue streams. Solutions reduce extraction opportunities. The status quo, however destructive to workers, remains lucrative for institutions. This creates political inertia. Stakeholders resist change not from ignorance but from interest. The working homeless crisis is not unsolvable. It is profitable. And profitable problems rarely get solved until the cost of inaction exceeds the benefit of extraction. That threshold has not yet been reached. The working homeless crisis forces a question that policymakers, corporations, and institutions keep avoiding. What does work actually guarantee anymore? For most of modern history, employment meant access to shelter, stability, and basic dignity. In 2026, that link is broken, when 1.22 million people with jobs are sleeping in cars. The issue is no longer wages alone. It is systemic failure. Workers are fulfilling their end of the deal, showing up, producing value, paying taxes, keeping cities functioning. In return, the system no longer provides the minimum requirement for survival, a place to live. This breakdown creates dangerous long-term consequences. If work does not secure housing, motivation collapses, workforce participation drops, job loyalty disappears. People stop planning for the future and shift into survival mode. Productivity, innovation, and community stability decline as life becomes transactional and temporary. The crisis also erodes trust. When people realize that education, hard work, and consistency no longer protect them, belief in institutions weakens. That loss of trust spreads faster than homelessness itself. Car homelessness is not an anomaly. It is proof. Proof that the economic model no longer aligns labor with life. Proof that housing has been decoupled from income. Proof that stability is now a privilege, not a standard. The defining question is whether working still means anything at all. What makes this crisis dangerous is how quickly it's becoming normal. Kansas City, Missouri is at the top of a list no city wants to be on. We have the largest homeless population per capita than any other city in America. City officials have an aggressive plan to change that. They say it's about more than getting people off the streets.